Take a look at this diagram. Right here in the middle of the Great Sea, shaped like a five-pointed star, is the island of Númenor. The divine rulers of this world gifted this landmass to the Edain, the mortal men who helped defeat the first Dark Lord. They placed the island perfectly between the eastern shores of Middle-earth and the western immortal realm of Aman. But there was one absolute rule, marked by this boundary line to the west. It was called the Ban of the Valar. The Valar, the supreme guardians of the world, forbade these mortals from ever sailing so far west that they lost sight of their own shores. For over 1,000 years, the Númenorians thrived within these limits. Their ships dominated the eastern seas, their cities filled with gold, and their people enjoyed lifespans lasting hundreds of years, far longer than any ordinary human. Yet living for centuries in an isolated paradise had an unintended side effect. As their power grew, they began to fixate on the one thing they couldn't conquer, their own mortality. They watched the elves live forever and started to resent their own inevitable end. Nobody invaded Númenor, no plague wiped them out. Instead, possessing a near-flawless existence made the concept of dying utterly unbearable. They had everything, which meant they had everything to lose. This is Armenelos, the capital city of Númenor in its final days. Notice the massive brutalist silver dome bleeding black smoke from its center. The city's white marble towers were once bathed in golden light, but now choke beneath a bruised purple sky and thick smog. This decay started with a monumental act of pride. The island's 25th ruler, King Ar-Pharazôn, sailed to Middle-earth to challenge the rising Dark Lord, Sauron. The king's army was so massive that Sauron surrendered immediately, allowing himself to be taken back to the island as a captive. Sauron didn't need an army to conquer Númenor, he just needed to talk. He recognized the citizens' deep-seated terror of dying. By playing on that exact fear, he manipulated his way out of a prison cell and directly into the role of the king's chief advisor. He fed them a specific, poisonous lie. Sauron claimed the Valar were hoarding the secret to eternal life out of jealousy. He promised that if the Númenorians rejected their old allies and worshipped the darkness instead, they would finally achieve true freedom and immortality. The entire physical environment of the capital contorted to match this ideological rot. The grand avenues and radiant buildings were no longer spaces built to celebrate life. They became monuments of paranoia, constructed by a society desperately trying to outrun the grave. At the center of this paranoia sat the Temple for Morgoth. It was a staggering structure with walls 50 feet thick and 500 feet high, capped by that massive silver dome. Inside, ash drifted across the stone floor toward a stained obsidian altar, lit by a perpetually burning central fire pit. To ignite that fire, Sauron commanded the destruction of the White Tree. This tree, named Nimloth, was an ancient, sacred gift from the elves and a physical symbol of the island's long-standing alliances. They chopped it into firewood and burned it on the altar, blanketing the city in a reeking cloud of smoke for 7 days. Burning symbolic wood was only the beginning. The rituals quickly escalated to systematic human sacrifice. The king's men began rounding up the faithful, the minority of citizens who refused to abandon their old beliefs, and slaughtered them on the altar. A deep psychological delusion drove these executions. The citizens genuinely believed that by offering human blood to Morgoth, Sauron's ancient defeated master, they could literally purchase their way out of the human condition and live forever. Sauron operated the temple as an ideological machine, guaranteeing the Númenorians would confidently sign their own divine death warrants. That ideological rot culminated in one final fatal command. King Ar-Pharazôn ordered the construction of the Great Armament. He intended to physically sail west, shatter the ban of the Valar, and take eternal life from the undying lands by force. Look at the sheer scale of this fleet. Thousands of black iron ships crowd the coastline, sitting on water that is perfectly still and ink black. They wait in absolute dead silence, beneath oppressive, geometric thunderheads building on the horizon. The environment itself tried to warn them. Massive thunderclouds shaped like eagles engulfed the skies, striking the island with lethal bolts of lightning. But instead of retreating, Sauron stood atop the temple dome, completely unharmed by the strikes, and laughed. This moment of paralysis on the water was the point of no return. By raising their anchors and sailing west, they escalated a localized religious cult into an active physical declaration of war against the very architecture of the universe. When the Armada finally reached the immortal shores, they didn't face a military counterattack. Instead, the Valar laid down their guardianship and called upon the supreme creator, Eru Ilúvatar. Eru didn't fight the Númenorians. He decided to geometrically break the world. The moment King Ar-Pharazôn and his troops set foot on the Undying Lands, the earth opened. The towering mountains collapsed directly on top of the fleet, burying the king and his men instantly and completely. The entire Golden City and the Temple of Morgoth violently shattered, dragged deep into a dark abyssal trench. Watch what happens to the map here. The creator physically bent the flat plane of the world into a sphere, detaching the Undying Lands and removing them from the reach of mortal navigation. Only a tiny fraction of the population survived the cataclysm. A small group of the faithful, led by Elendil, escaped the destruction on 9 ships. They rode the massive waves eastward to Middle-earth, carrying the last remnants of their civilization. The ultimate tragedy of Númenor is one of supreme irony. They were a civilization so paralyzed by the fear of a natural death that they engineered their own immediate, catastrophic erasure from the face of the earth.